Welcome to Phonogenics 101, a Riotboy production hosted by Jeremy Gloff. The podcast where people who love music discuss albums track by track. Please hit subscribe, and if you'd like to support this podcast, patreon.com/Jeremy Gloff or Venmo @Jeremy Gloff. And now, on to the music. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Phonogenics 101. We're here with the Blondie family. This is episode 104, so we're working our way into the hundreds. We're having a couple of technical difficulties with Barry. However, it is his birthday today, so whoever is listening or watching this, everyone wish the fabulous Barry Kramer a very happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yay!
Happy birthday, Barry.
Happy birthday, Barry.
Oh.
One of our normal panel members, Daniel Cartier, has to leave to do a work project. However, we're going to start off the podcast with Daniel giving us a synopsis of what he thinks of Autoamerican, just so the fans will know.
Okay. It's not my favorite Blondie album. It has some great songs on it, obviously, some of their best known tracks and some of their history making tracks, the first quote unquote rap single ever to hit #1 on Billboard. And definitely was an album that crossed a lot of genres. Like, they were really kind of, at this point, really kind of going out on a limb with a lot of tracks. And, famously, like, Rolling Stone hated this album. Like, Rolling Stone, I mean, I was actually reading up on it earlier today before because I like to kind of go back and read some of the, and so this was an album that actually kind of like some people like had problems with. I love every Blondie album. I think the two albums we just talked about in the last two are, and obviously their debut album, are like, well, and then we're going to be talking about The Hunter too, that has a special place in my heart. But that's also an album that has a lot of opinions from people. This album, it's not an album I listen to as much as the other albums. And when I do, I gotta admit, I'm more inclined to go to the like certain songs. I mean, like, and some of them that's like the most well-known songs. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Autoamerican. I feel so bad I have to leave because I know you guys are going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff about it. So, well,
you'll be back for The Hunter, though, right? Because I know
I will definitely be back for The Hunter, because that is that album I'm like very serious about.
All right. Well, good luck making music tonight, and thanks for stopping in. It's always good to see you.
Have a great conversation, everybody.
See you, Daniel.
Everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. I see Barry's message that the mic isn't working. Until you get it fixed, Barry, if you want to type anything, I can. I'll say out loud what you want to say. I'll be the transcriber. So Autoamerican, I haven't listened to it in a while, and they just tried everything in the kitchen sink this time around. I just don't even know how to feel about the album. I'm not sure. You guys can kind of fill in the blanks here. Looking at a timeline, Each of the Beat came out in late September 79. Call Me was only released 3 months later in January 80. So Each of the Beat seems like it didn't have too long of a shelf life before they moved on to a soundtrack single. That was a huge hit. And then this album came out later in 1980. Definitely, we're moving into the 80s here. The cover artwork, it's a painting, definitely very 80s. A lot of bands from the 70s didn't transition to the 80s, so Blondie did with this album. And yeah, let's start off. Jimmy, you have your hand up. Let's start off.
Well, in our last Phonogenics, we said we were going to cover Call Me in this podcast. So I didn't know if you wanted to do that before we get to the album, since that had been released prior to this album.
Good idea. So with Call Me, we have, do you pronounce it Giorgio Moroder? Am I doing that right? Mm-hmm. Famous for producing Donna Summer. He went in a more of a rock direction on Donna's Bad Girls album, and he would later on with The Wanderer. But I feel with Call Me, he, didn't he have different lyrics, and Debbie didn't like him, so she wrote the lyrics to Call Me, because It was inspired by the film American Gigolo.
Right.
Yeah, apparently the lyrics were something like man machine, and they were very literal, and it was like, I am a man and I fuck the women, and Debbie's like, I can't sing that. She said that in interviews, and she said, I could come up with something better, and I think she did.
She did.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a demo of that man machine though.
And on the American Gigolo soundtrack, isn't there a long instrumental called like Night Drive or something? That's the instrumental of Call Me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, several of the songs actually are based on the Call Me melody. Several of the instrumentals are based on the Call Me melody at different speeds and different instrumentation and things like that.
Giorgio went on to produce a shelved Donna Summer album called I'm a Rainbow, and there's a song on there called Leave Me Alone that has a kind of rock shuffle thing that started with Call Me. Yeah, it's a great single. I mean, huge hit. Dude, was Each the Beat looked at as a failure at the time? Does anyone remember? Because I was too young to remember.
It outshadowed. I mean, what happened was Each the Beat came out, and it was kind of getting moderate success, but then Call Me came out and just blasted, and it's almost like Each of the Beat was thrown aside because Call Me got so much attention.
I feel like in this modern age, they would have re-released the album as like a deluxe edition with Call Me on it.
Exactly.
The Target edition. All right, Charlie.
Yeah, I wasn't alive in 1980. I wasn't around for it, but upon doing research, because I have my own podcasts that I do, so I look at a lot of different stuff. And Eat to the Beat was actually one of Billboard's top 10 selling albums of 1980.
Oh.
So I was pretty surprised to find that out, but I thought, well, that's the power of Blondie. I can't fault that at all, but it just seemed like it wasn't as successful as coming in between both Parallel Lines and Autoamerican. So I was very pleasantly surprised to find that out, actually. So I guess, for its time, that's not bad at all to be in the top 10 albums for a year.
And I remember it was in the collection of everyone that I knew that listened to music. Like I had older cousins. Everyone had Eat to the Beat. So maybe it didn't, wasn't huge on like the singles chart.
Yeah, the singles did not do as well as what was expected, I think.
Right. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I was alive when that came out. And I remember when Eat to the Beat came out, there was a huge push for that. And I remember seeing Blondie everywhere. And I mean, I remember seeing them like on, the Mike Douglas show. And there was this horrible variety show called Pink Lady and Jeff. And they played Each of the Beat on it. And I remember like they were always showing the videos, and Kids Are People Too. There was that Saturday morning show that came out. It's on YouTube. It's hysterical. And it's like being interviewed by, a bunch of kids that probably look like us now. But yeah, but it was everywhere. But yeah, the singles just never really caught on. I mean, and I was alive when I remember where I was. I was in 7th grade, and I was out on Long Island at the roller skating rink, and the DJ was like, the new Blondie song came out, and people just swarm onto the roller rink, and everyone was going crazy because this song Call Me came on, and it was just manic. It was manic when that song came on. And I just remember you could not escape Call Me, and it just kind of just blew Eat to the Beat out of the water. I think it caught everyone by surprise.
Probably even them.
It was the number one song of 1980, actually.
Yeah, it was.
6 weeks at number one.
Yes, and I'm a little mad at Funky Town because Funky Town took over the number one spot from Call Me. So I was a little upset at the time by Funky Town, Lips Inc. or whatever.
All right. So Call Me, huge hit. And then now those that were around at the time, I was 5, but I didn't come into Blind Blondie records till The Best of Blondie, which came out after this. Do you remember the emergence of Autoamerican and going to the record store and seeing the cover for the first time and how you felt?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get some stories here from y'all.
Well,
go ahead,
I think
Jimmy.
that the first thing I heard was The Tide Is High because that came out before the album, and I'm like, what band is this, and why am I hearing this sound? So I went and bought the 45, and I actually liked the song on the back, Susie and Jeffrey,
Okay.
more than I liked The Tide is High at the time, because I was just kind of like, I wasn't really sure about it. But if you want me to go into like then what happened when I went and bought the album, I eagerly went to the record store, went to my best friend's house, never forget. I mean, well, of course I possibly will forget it. Went to my best friend's house. He put it on. The needle goes down, and we are all of a sudden. I'm like, oh my god, they put the wrong album in the sleeve. I was like, this is not Blondie. I was like, they have made a mistake. This is a different album. We were like, what's going on? But then when the kind of the beat kicks in Europa, then I started kind of understanding, okay, this is going to evolve into something. But, having bought the album, I think the album cover is a good kind of a clue at what you're going to get. Because I think it's interesting that they did not use a photograph of Debbie Harry on the album. Because, I mean, clearly she was at her most, she was gorgeous. The face for days. I mean, she could have given anything, but they chose like a painting, like a work of art. So I think that was kind of like a clue as to what you were going to get with this album.
I'd have to say that this is probably, I know everybody loves the Parallel Lines album cover, and it is iconic. I actually saw a photo today of the cast of Big Bang Theory, and they were all the guys were dressed in black, and Kaylee Kuko was dressed like Debbie, and they were in front of the black and white stripes. It was actually very, very cool and good homage to Blondie. But honestly, the Autoamerican album cover, I think, is their best album cover out of all of them. And Panic of Girls is pretty good too, but the I don't know what it is. I guess it is the artwork. I mean, you look at it and you're looking out on New York, and you're on top of this building, and this wall is kind of almost nasty looking that they're standing in front of, and it just totally says New York, which is what they are. And I agree with Jimmy that it's really different from the other covers because it's not a real life photo. It's an image of them, an interpretation of them, and that's kind of what all the songs are on this. It's a very diverse album. Of course, Blondie, came into this realm of just trying so many different genres on one album, and I really feel like Eat to the Beat and Autoamerican were the start of that. And Autoamerican just took let's just throw out consistency and just do what we like, and came up with, just had all these different genres on this particular album, and that cover kind of alludes to that because it's an interpretation of somebody's seeing their image, and the music is kind of like their interpretation of or their image of different styles that they were interested in. That's something Blondie's never been afraid to do, is just they hear like a new type of music coming out that's not even popular yet, for example Rapture, and they try it. And Autoamerican is the epitome of that. It's and I really feel like the cover kind of shows that.
I remember my mom had a friend named Teresa that had a daughter named Stacy, and she had the Autoamerican vinyl. And I guess the record company made a mistake because there was a different inner sleeve from the album, and she insisted that it was the way the album was supposed to be. So I always wondered if that misprint was a big thing or just individual. And second of all, I love the rotating cast of characters on Barry's camera. The first person that came, like, oh, Barry's aging backwards for his birthday. All right, Charlie, your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to point out, speaking of the cover, I don't know if any of you watch Stranger Things, but this album cover is on Nancy Wheeler's bedroom wall, and I think that just shows what an iconic 80s image it is, and especially considering the show's set a few years after
Right.
this album came out. So I think it's just that beloved of an image that I felt the need to point that out, because now I always think of Nancy Wheeler and Stranger Things, because Nancy, I love to see they made her a Blondie fan.
And let's also mention, like, the font they use is definitely very 80s. We have the Autoamerican written very, like, I guess would that be futuristic for the time? Of course, I have the 2 different CD editions. But yeah, and then the inner sleeve, of course, was a close-up of the nasty wall. So it definitely had a different feel than any Blondie album before it. And anything else anyone wants to say about the general album before we go into the track by track?
Well, yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead.
You're good.
well,
We'll do Mark, or go Jimmy, then Mark.
Okay.
Okay. I think that this is where Blondie turned into a studio band. I think that, the prior albums, they were, a band, but in this album, it just screams studio band, because there are a lot of session players and just effects that don't translate into live music quite as easily, I think. So that was just my thought about the album overall.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was also kind of thinking of what was going on in pop music at that time. And at that time, there was a lot of concept albums. I mean, I was alive at that time. Like Pink Floyd's The Wall was very big that year. And also, what was that other? I didn't care for Styx, Paradise Hotel, or whatever. That was big, concept albums. And I think this was kind of their attempt at making, a full package or a full kind of creation in their own way. And even when you look at the album cover itself, it's, an artist rendition of it. It's, art, in quotation marks. And, even though a lot of the reviews, ragged them at the time for trying to be too arty, or this is being Chris Stein's, pet project. This was definitely Blondie's take on, I feel like Parallel Lines and Eat to the Beat were kind of like, okay, now we got your attention. Now we're really gonna see if you want to go on this ride. It's like we kind of got you going along. Now it's like bam, 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 bam. We're gonna show you, everything else that interests us. We're gonna challenge you to, different types of music and everything, which I think is very funny because it was right on that cusp of new wave exploding, and they were the people at the time pushing it. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, it's here. Yeah, we're not going to do that now. Where that was really what people expected them to do. And I think that's kind of part of their genius, as artists. So, yeah, that's just kind of my overall take on the album.
I feel like it was definitely an era of ambitious albums. Another one I'd throw in the mix is Tusk by Fleetwood Mac. Just
that was the year before. Yeah.
Very ambitious. And Mark, I think I mentioned this on another podcast, but me and my friends don't call it art in quotation marks. We call it art. There's art and then art. So I feel like the cover of Autoamerican is definitely art. So anyhow, any other thoughts on the album in general? Giorgio Moroder seemed to produce a few demos. It doesn't seem like those versions were drastically different than what ended up on the album. But Mike Chapman ended up coming back to produce. They went to LA and recorded the album in LA, but insisted on the album cover being taken in New York. Mm-hmm. So, any other thoughts on the album before we go into our track by track discussion?
Yeah, some of those demos are on that Against the Odds box set that just came out a couple months back. And they're very interesting. And some of the demos have a male voice, and I'm not sure who it is singing on those. I don't know if it's Chapman or if it's, Destry or something like that, but they're very interesting versions that really stayed pretty much the same. Like, I Love You, Honey, Give Me a Beer is the original version of Go Through It. And it's very, very similar. And the lyrics are very similar, and it's really good. And just, by the way, I want you all to notice that I am in front of that nasty wall right now.
Oh, so. Yes, you are. I love the themed background.
Thank you.
All right, we have the Kramer cam back in the house. Is the sound working? Well, doesn't seem like it. Jump in. If you all jump in, that's totally awesome. All right, Europa. What the fuck? I remember when I was a kid, I'm like, okay, because I was guess 6 or 7 when I got into Blondie. I went back and bought all the albums because on the back of Best of Blondie, it had like what album each hit was from, and of course, there's 2 major hits on this album. But we have an instrumental introduction here. I guess I'm going to keep using the word ambitious on this album. Debbie Harry does some spoken word poetry in the end about automobiles. Welcome to the 1980s. What do you all think of this song?
To me, it's actually, I was just, there's this column I read on Stereo Gum called The Number Ones. If you don't read it, I highly recommend it. And they've done some Blondie articles, of course, in the past, but it was an interesting parallel, if you will, recently. So the last one they did was Lady Gaga's Born This Way. And in the article, the guy said this was her moment when she decided she could do whatever she wanted because she was too big to fail. And I think that this is Blondie's moment of being too big to fail. They just had this massive hit with Call Me. They were one of the biggest bands in America. It's like, we're gonna throw it to the wall and see what it does. I think it's very cool sounding either way, but I definitely think this is an example of we're popular enough that we can do what we want and people will still buy it, so we're gonna do it. And I respect that.
I'm trying to think of albums off the top of my head that are like that. I guess I thought of Rated R by Rihanna. I feel like that's her. I Can Do What I Want. Nothing else is coming to me. Hey, does anyone have any of those off the top of their head just for fun?
Oh.
Yeah. I guess a lot of popular bands didn't exactly go in the Europa direction, did they? So
with Europa, though, it's very Blondie sounding. I mean, for being an orchestrated piece of music, it's got a very Blondie sound. Does anybody know who wrote that? Did Chris Stein write that, or is that somebody else's song?
Chris Stein.
Okay, but yeah, I think it's a perfect opener for this.
It's
album.
unfortunate that Barry's not here because he has an acoustic version of Chris Stein playing the guitar to Europa.
Oh my gosh, I'd love to have that.
It's like crazy to hear how it began. You hear it on acoustic guitar and like why that wasn't on the box set. It's like so infuriating. It's like there's tons of stuff.
I did read on Wikipedia that Chris Stein wanted to call the album Coca-Cola because it was a very American sounding album, but Coca-Cola wouldn't let him. But I feel like looking at this body of work under that title kind of does make a lot of sense to me. It is, many different versions of the American sound. For me, what makes this song a Blondie song most is when that kick drum comes in. Yes. That's what kind of sets it apart from, anything else. I'm like, okay. And then of course, when Debbie comes in, who else would do a song like this? Oh, Barry's back. Do we got sound from you?
I'm on here through the phone. Does it work?
Yeah, you're here.
Does.
Excellent. I had a comment on what you were just talking about, the Coca-Cola thing. That's probably why that one of the LPs, the bonus LPs in the new box set, is named Coca-Cola.
Okay, right. Do you have any?
Does that disc have the Autoamerican demos and stuff on it, Barry? The Coca-Cola one?
I don't remember what's on that one right off the top of my head.
I think that one has.
And Jimmy said you've got an acoustic version of Chris doing Europa. I sure would love for you to share that with the rest of us at some point.
Sorry, Barry, you weren't here.
Off the record, of course. We won't broadcast it, but
yes, off the record. Sorry.
Okay, does anybody else want to talk about Europa? Definitely a daring. We're not in plastic letters territory anymore, are we?
No, definitely not. I mean, it sounds like movie music to me. And, at first I'm just kind of like, is this the soundtrack to Lawrence of Arabia? And then it kind of gets kind of like almost B-movie kind of sounding and sounds like, Plan 9 from Outer Space or something, and then it kind of falls into, when the kick drum and then Chris's guitar, it just definitely has a very, very, Blondie sound, and of course the spoken word element to it is just based on the desire for total mobility.
Right.
It's so
I
1984.
love it, but it's just
Yes.
it's just so cool. I just think it's so cool, and it just lets you know that you're in for something really, really, really different. And as in like whatever I was, 8th grade, 12 years old or something, I was just like, my mind was blown. This was my first Blondie album. I didn't get the parallel lines or Each of the Beat album experience yet. This was my first full album with them, and they blew me away on this one. This is like my go-to. So in a way, Autoamerican and Europa in particular was just a perfect introduction. It was like, your life is forever going to be changed, and this is the introduction to it. And I just think it's kind of hysterical, so.
The thing I like about Debbie's delivery of the poem or whatever, the spoken word, is that it never crescendos. Like, you expect it to kind of get more, but she keeps it flat and then it's just over. So I thought there would be more, but then it was done. So I felt that was very Debbie, and that kind of made me love it even more.
Jimmy, I agree with you that it is very Eurythmics 1984 sounding. The just the whole song and the way it ends with her doing that spoken word part,
that future speak.
And this album, I meant to say this earlier, is actually I got this as a gift from my father, who just recently passed, and so this album always has a special moment for me, or special meaning to me, because it was something from my father. But does anybody remember, didn't Chris and Debbie buy the rights for some book or some movie around this same time, and they were going to do this film with Debbie as the main character? And I'm just wondering if Europa is maybe something that might have been things Chris was testing for this movie.
Perhaps, yeah. It was Alphaville that they were trying to remake. Yes. And they thought they bought the rights, but they didn't.
Whoops. All right. Any other thoughts on Europa?
The only thing I would say is I could have used more gong. That when it's like at its crescendo of the track is a boom, boom. It's like almost 2001 sounding.
Yeah.
But they don't do it. Like they should have like boom, 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 boom. That's my only thing, is that I would have used more gong.
Now, Jimmy, you're famous for wanting to resequence albums. In the Jimmy world,
that's at the end.
But does Europa still open the album in the Jimmy world?
All will be revealed at the end of the podcast.
All right, I give Europa 2 thumbs up, though. A daring song. Only Blondie could do it. I can't imagine any other band mixing all these ingredients together and coming up with a song like this. All right. Track 2, Live It Up. We got the background singers back from who's singing on this one?
B-Girls or something.
B-Girls,
which was a band she was producing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of these songs, I'm kind of unsure how I feel about them. Like, I kind of love them. Kind of like, my thought when I was a kid is that there was a lot of filler on this album. When I listen to it today, I don't know if I feel that way. So I feel like y'all are going to sway me to either love or not love this album. So get to work, everyone. All right, Live It Up. Who wants to start this one out?
I'll start it. Live It Up. I mean, I kind of like Live It Up. I love the drumming on it. But to me, this song always just kind of was the quintessential 1980 New York sound. It was kind of like a New York disco sound, much more sophisticated than what was going on, across the country at the time. It had a sheen, and it had a feel of like New York nightlife to me. It just had, this wasn't necessarily downtown nightlife. This is kind of like, I always felt it had more of like an uptown New York kind of feel to it. It had almost like, not quite 54, but something much more exclusive, or much more clandestine than say 54, not as quite in your face as something like that. I always thought that this had like a very sophisticated kind of sound, but also slightly decadent, just the whole thing. And it's actually, I believe it's one of their earlier songs. I think it dates back like to 75 or something with them. But I always felt like this would have like fit in her like Merjani jean commercial as opposed to like the Lounge Lizards or something. It just had that kind of cool groove to it that it had. Some like we were talking about it with somebody, and I was like, yeah, it just has a very 1980s feel to it. I was like, if it had a smell, it would be cocaine, because that's just kind of what it feels. It feels slightly decadent, slightly cool, slightly fun, but very much kind of like background music. Like it's just like part of a scene, it's not, it's not the whole scene. It's part of the scene. And I can kind of understand what you're saying. A lot of it being filler. I think this is a little bit above filler though. It does evoke a feeling in me.
I do.
Mark, I'm sorry, Mark. It's so funny you say it smells like cocaine, because the very first two lines are "Your old lover's lying in the gutter. He used to be such an all-night strutter." I mean, yeah. I mean, is that not New York or what?
Yeah.
And then talks about soft and plush, and so I totally agree with that. And the disco version of this, which is like 8 or 9 minutes long, is really good, because it breaks down into those drums and the background street noise, and
the bass line is great.
Yes.
I kind of consider this like the opening song on the album. I mean, Europa, of course, is, but this is like the first song. And after, opening tracks like Hanging on the Telephone and Dreaming, I just feel like this is a little underwhelming to me. I don't think it sucks, but I kind of feel like it's a little pedestrian considering what came before it to me. All right, Jimmy, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like a brilliant follow-up to Europa, because it's like they took us from this future space back to the disco. And, the backup vocals are great for this track. It's I think she sings with a lot of sass on it. And I love the shift in the tone when it goes to Darken the Night. The song kind of takes a little bit of a serious turn. And then she just, brings it back to a kind of a sassy note. I love that, it's so passe to sleep without you every day. I mean, there's so many lines in it that I just think are great, fun lyrically. And I was just like, I made a note, like bring on the horns, because I think that we're really getting some different Blondie sounds, where Eat to the Beat was all about the drums. Autoamerican features a lot of horns and brass, so I just thought it was a fun track to follow Europa, and I'm not mad about it at all.
Okay, any other thoughts on Live It Up? Okay, Barry.
I do have a comment. Someone mentioned that it was an early song, and in fact it was. In 1993, I believe it was, late 93, maybe early 94, Chris gave me a copy of Blondie's resume from back in the day. There is a copy on Blondie.net archive site, but Live It Up is actually on that resume, and it's from like 1974 or 75. Very early song.
And I'm wondering if the early versions didn't have as disco-y of a bass as it turned out to have.
Probably not. Probably.
All right. Live It Up. Going once, going twice. Next. I was playing in my car today, and I forgot that Here's Looking at You is next. Interesting song, not your everyday Blondie. I remember when I was a kid, I hated this song. I'm like, oh, what is this? What is this loungy, jazzy stuff? I wanted Victor back. But Blondie's never one to repeat themselves, except on Live It Up. I'm being bitchy. Okay, what do y'all think of Here's Looking at You?
Well, I'll go. To me, I was like, okay, Glenn Miller's in the house now. Where are we now? By the time this song came on, I realized I was going on a journey.
Right.
This album was going to take me places, because it took me from the orchestra to the disco. And now here I'm at some kind of Glenn Miller, place. I I love when she said "hit it, boys." I mean, she just threw in so many charming elements to, what at the time I didn't really appreciate it. I'm with you, Jeremy, in that like when I was a teenager, it wasn't really my jam. I'm like, wasn't really sure about what this was. Of course, now, for me, I'm like loving it. I love that song now.
I definitely loved it more on this listen. When you think about like pop artists or rock artists that kind of went jazzy big band, I think of like the Linda Ronstadt stuff from the mid 80s, Carly Simon's Torch album. And then even later in the 2000s, you had like the Christina Aguilera Back to the Basics. But, we all talk about how Blondie was the first one to kind of do rap. But I think even this was kind of different than other people were doing at the time. This album's so ballsy in the things they tried. I'm trying to think of any other high-profile bands that had such a patchwork quilt of styles like Blondie had on this album. It's pretty cool. Charlie, your hands up.
It's really funny that you mentioned just now Linda Ronstadt, Carly Simon. I'm a fan of them as well, but it's just very funny to me because 1980, they were trying to sound like Blondie in 1980, really, with their
true
new wave sound. So it's it's just very funny that that's the case to me. And the other one I want to mention, so my favorite diva of them all is Cher, and another one trying to sound like Blondie in 1980, even though it's like it's a weird reversal to me on this song and a couple others on this album for the New York punk band to be going jazz torch songs while the ladies who did those songs were trying to sound like Blondie.
Yeah, because you had Carly Simon come upstairs, Linda Mad Love. A lot of the 70s divas did try to do the cool 80s album to varying degrees, we shall say. Although I do love How Will I Make You. I love How Will I Make You. That's such a freaking great song. Linda Ronstadt doing Blondie. All right. Mark.
Also, with this album, with the song in particular, I think she starts it out very great. It's very like coy. And I love when she goes, "Hit it, boys," and boom, 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 boom. And then I feel like her vocal's kind of flat. I really don't feel like I follow her that whole time. She like reinvented her voice and she did the Jazz Passengers. And the whole time she was doing the Jazz Passengers, I was like, I really wish she would go back and revisit this song because I know she has a better vocal than the one that's on this album. I just feel like she was definitely trying to do new things with her voice, and that's very obvious in this album. I don't 100% know if it was completely successful on this song outside of like the opening and then the little sigh at the end. It falls a little flat for me, and this hurts my heart to say because
I think that was intentional.
I'm sorry.
I think that was kind of intentional, though, of their part to kind of really, not utilize a big vocal range, but kind of keep it in the sound of that era. Where it would be more of an anonymous girl singer singing in Glenn Miller's band. Where the band is kind of the focus. So, I mean, to me, it was kind of like, I think that it was kind of intentional on their part to kind of do it that way. I mean, anyway, that was my take.
Yeah, and it very well could have been intentional. I mean, for me personally, I don't know if it was 100%, effective. But now having said that, when that album, when my CD thing or my music is going on random and this comes up, I crank it up and I sing along with it, because I do find it infectious. It also kind of reminds me, we were talking about other artists who kind of went down like this kind of Tin Pan Alley route. And when I was listening to it, I just immediately thought of Annie Lennox, Keep Young and Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, yeah. She was like, predating Annie Lennox, like kind of dabbling in this kind of stuff. And it just kind of shows you how they always were like 2, 3, in this case, 7 years ahead of the game, with what people were kind of starting to do.
I think I approach this song kind of like to bring it back to art. I love what the song is more than I love the song itself. Like, I love that they did this. I will never come home and pull out the CD so I can play this song. I might even skip it, but I love that it's there and I love that they did it. Awesome. And I'm not a big fan of this kind of music from any artist. Like Torch or What's New aren't the first albums I pull out from Linda or Carly. Okay, James.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with Jimmy about the intentionality of the way she sang that song. To me, it's almost kind of pouty. I mean, if you look at the lyrics, she's kind of going back and forth, about here's looking at you. I should have stopped drinking, but here's looking at you, and so it's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence, insecure. It's almost like an insecure moment for her in this song. So I kind of think those lyrics were intentional. Mark, I totally agree with the Annie Lennox reference there. To Keep Young and Beautiful is a great song, and this song is kind of a precursor to that. Whether Annie Lennox ever heard this song or not, who knows? But it really is in the same vein. And then finally, with this song, I think is an excellent lead in to the next song that we're going to get to. Personally, I do.
Just putting out there, I am considering Eurythmics for Phonogenics season 3.
Yes.
For anyone that's interested, and Annie's solo albums, I think they all got to do those. So I'm glad to hear that I already have a panel. That makes life easy. Okay. Any other thoughts on Here's Looking at You? I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up just because it was a bold move from the band that did Heart of Glass 2 albums earlier. I'll never pull the CD out and listen to this song ever in my life. Okay. The Tide is High. It's a cover of a 1967 reggae song. Huge hit for Blondie. I've heard so many bad karaoke versions of the song. No one does it like Debbie. We have Darth Vader in the music video, right? I don't have much to say about this song because it all speaks for itself. What a great single. Didn't they sing it live on like a public access show a year or so before it was ever recorded? See, I know my Blondie, you guys. Are you a little impressed?
That was called TV Party, I believe, with who was it? Glenn
O'Brien.
Yes, Glenn O'Brien. He did there's like a whole series of them. You can buy the DVD of it. And Debbie and Chris will both get on there and just do crazy stuff on this show. And one of the things they did though is they sang Tide is High. It's very raw, but it is very interesting.
All right.
She's holding the lyrics in her hand because she doesn't even know the lyrics yet.
Right.
Little did she know it was going to be a number 1 iconic single, a year later. Okay, Charlie, your hands up.
Yeah, so it's interesting that column that I read about this being a number hit. It was really much all those horns again. They're here on this album. This is a ska cover, and I think this is. I mean, we all hear Rapture, pop chart first rap song. This probably is the first ska song that topped the charts, and I think that's very important and a precursor, even if it's not quite as influential as old hip hop. But it's funny for me. I'm the youngest one here, so the first version I heard of The Tide is High was a cover of this. It was by a British girl group called Atomic Kitten because it was in a movie that I liked when I was a kid. My father informed me that's actually a Blondie song, but internet I find out it's a Paragon song, and it's just so. I think it's the sign of a great song that it's gone through so many iterations over these years and been intact. That's just, I mean, that's a foolproof song right there. So not much else to say about it other than that it's iconic and a classic.
I feel like Blondie came into the 80s here planting so many seeds of things that would happen later. Because, like, I'm thinking, could there have been a No Doubt without Tide is High? You know what I mean? And I never thought about that before. Like, Blondie doesn't get the credit for that one, and I think they should. All right, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, Gwen would give Blondie credit. I think that they have in the past. But I want to piggyback on kind of Mark's comments about Debbie's vocals on Here's Looking at You. I think that in The Tide is High, I mean, I made a note. What was their intent with the delivery of her vocals? Because they're kind of monotone in a way, the way it's sung. I mean, of course, the lyrics are so simplistic. And it's like it's like they're in on the joke. I feel like of The Tide Is High. It's bubblegum catchy, yes. America loved it. I remember being in a record store and they played it. I remember this random woman's like, oh my gosh, well, who is this? And of course I was too happy to walk her to the Blondie section to have her purchase the album. But with it, it's like I feel like they were in on the joke of like the way the vocals are given and just all of it. But like I said earlier, when it came out as a single, I was playing the B-side, frankly. But it is a classic and it did break new ground, in radio, and give it its props.
All right, Mark.
Jimmy, this is funny because I'm gonna go the other way because I think her vocal on this is so good.
Oh, I'm not saying it wasn't good.
I love the vocal on it, and you're kind of right. I said it earlier. She was trying to do something different with her voice, and she kind of had like a nasally kind of like she had that like very upfront voice, and like on Each of the Beat it was much wider and bigger, and on this it kind of got fuzzy and muffled on this album. And I mean, I'm sure that was intentional. I'm sure they wanted to get her to have a different sound on it, and it's really evident in The Tide Is High. But I think the combination of her lead vocal matched with her backing vocals and the overlay of the backing vocal, I just think is pure perfection.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely
yeah,
love
don't
it.
get me wrong. Yeah. I wasn't criticizing it. I think it's a brilliantly constructed, performed, and produced song. I mean, I don't think they could have done it any better, but it just feels to me like they kind of knew they had something with it.
Yeah, they definitely did. And I think I think Mike Chapman did an amazing job of constructing everything. Like everything fit together like very tightly, and it was very, very layered and very big. And whereas like on say Eat to the Beat and Parallel Lines, Clem would like run away with songs and it was all about the drums, and he's fit very tightly into the groove of this album, and you never really see him coloring outside of the lines on this album.
Wow,
but
that's so true.
Yeah, back to like The Tide Is High. I love how it is. I love how they have I don't think I've ever heard on a reggae song a violin playing the melody line in it. And once that you hear, and that's Walter Sedling, who did that screeching on TV Party. But he has this beautiful melodic violin line that goes through it. And once you hear that, it just kind of pulls its arm around you and just like hooks you in. And I just find that's part of like the amazing groove of this song and how wonderful it was to construct. I had read that like it took them a while. There was like, I don't know, 3 tracks of them just tapping drumsticks on a piano bench, just to kind of get the percussion just right. I think it shows. I love the fullness of this song, and just everything is placed so carefully and so wonderfully in this song. I know it's not particularly one of my favorites of theirs, but when I hear it, it's like I said, it's that arm just reaches around and it just pulls you in, and you can't help yourself. You just fall into that groove. So yeah.
All right, James.
Yeah, I agree with Mark as far as the the production of that song and the production of all their songs with Mike Chapman. I mean, Mike Chapman had this magic touch of taking the Blondie sound, not changing it, but making it fuller and more palatable to the masses, to put it out there so that not only the people in the CBGB scene or the, whatever enjoyed it, other people could enjoy it as well, but it was still the Blondie sound. And Mike Chapman is the one who did that. And then Mark, you were also talking about how, the vocals on Eat to the Beat were different. Eat to the Beat, Debbie's vocals were very aggressive on Eat to the Beat. And if you'll notice on every one of these songs, except for maybe 1 or 2 on the flip side, she's more docile on this album with her vocals. And, maybe that was intentional. who knows? I mean, she went from being this, on Eat to the Beat, and then all of a sudden we're kind of this moody, thought-provoking chanteuse on this album. Who knows? I mean, again, they're in on the joke. They know what it was about, and we'll never know unless we, really talk to them about that. My last comment about The Tide is High is like at the end when you've got that laugh part. I would love to know who did that, and I would love to hear the raw version of that song where it just recorded all the way until Chris or Mike Chapman or somebody said, "Okay, cut, we got it." I would love to hear the raw tapes of this to see what it sounded like before the Mike Chapman, got into it with his creativity.
Two things that y'all brought up on this podcast so far. It never occurred to me how deadpan Debbie was on a lot of these songs compared to other previous albums, and then how reined in Clem was. And that really does create like kind of the vibe and framework for this album, and really kind of makes me appreciate I didn't think of how strategic those choices must have been in the production. So there's a lot more at play here than I think I ever gave the album credit for. I'm kind of intrigued. I'm gonna have a lot to think about after this podcast tonight. Any other thoughts on The Tide is High?
Well, Clem had actually said when he walked into Autoamerican that he was going to, because he was a big Keith Moon fan. He always tried to play in the style of Keith Moon. And he had said when he walked into Autoamerican, he approached it more like a jazz musician, and he wanted to like really reel himself in and play much more focused. So, and that sounds it.
Awesome. Okay, Barry.
I know one thing about this song is that Chris tried to buy the rights to it before they put it out. And he obviously must have known that it was going to be successful, but they wouldn't sell him the rights.
Wow. All right. I can't imagine a Blondie universe without Tide is High. All right, moving on. We have a Jimmy Destry song, I believe. Angels on the Balcony. When I was a kid, there was a skip on this song, so I can't unhear it as an adult. Do you ever have that when you're a kid? Like there's a skip in a certain part of the album and you can never unhear it? Listening to it in my car today, I feel like this is trending a little bit more in classic Blondie territory, but still Auto-American style. Definitely not a retread. I think this is a beautiful song. I love the tremolo guitars. What do y'all think of this one? All right, Jimmy.
Okay. Yeah, I want to get this out of the way. I've got a good one in here. All right. First off, it's like it starts off, it's like, what is all this banging? What is this is happening? So it's kind of like, I now question, is that necessary? I don't know, because I really feel like without it, it would have been a strong choice for a single. I mean, because it really is a solid song. And to me, this is the only Blondie song that I could ever even imagine Stevie Nicks singing. Yeah. But the lyrics to this song, I could literally hear Stevie Nicks doing a version of Angels on the Balcony. I think Debbie shows a lot of vocal restraint in the singing of this, but I just think it is like great. I just think it's a great track in and of itself. And actually, I was asked by a friend who does some kind of radio show or whatever, and he was like, "Give me a Blondie song that people wouldn't expect to hear." And this is the one I gave him. I said, this is like a very different sound, from the hits per se. So I really love it.
For me, it's
Stevie
nice to
love it too.
Oh yeah, Stevie would love it. It's kind of nice to have some of that atmosphere back, like from Union City and Shayla. Not that this song sounds anything like that, but we're getting a little bit of that more emotional, the layers. Okay, we have Mark and then James.
Yeah, it was funny. I was just recently on like a Facebook thread, and they were talking about Angels on the Balcony, and they was having a debate on whether that intro to the song was necessary or not. And it was funny because I was thinking, I was like, I don't know. And as I was like making notes and stuff and just writing down ideas about what I thought about, certain things, this is a great story song, because it's telling the story of this haunted theater and stuff. And it's very atmospheric. And even Debbie's voice is kind of in that, she's still in that lower register, and she's finding this really, really fuzzy, interesting sound to her voice. But that intro, and it's just very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just very confusing, and it's very despondent, and it's just all over, and it's startling. Even when it starts, it's like kind of startling and everything. And I almost feel like that's kind of like, I immediately pictured this haunted mansion, and this haunted mansion sitting by itself with no one in it, and this is the sound that's going on inside of it, and then a door opens, and then it's quiet, and it's like Afterglow, and then the song starts, and then and like the people come in, and then the children come in, and they see this phantom cigarette in the back, and it immediately painted a picture. And I just thought it was just really, really like amazing songwriting. And I've always been a fan of Jimmy Destry's songwriting. I've said it a million times. I really felt like he had evolved as a songwriter with this song. I agree, it could have been a single. I think it's just really great. I love how it churns along. I love the guitar solo at the end, and that little wah, 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 it has a very, very moody, atmospheric vibe. Has like a vibration to it that almost kind of gets in your solar plexus, and kind of like, is a little disturbing too. A lot of fun. It's a fucking fun song. I really enjoy it.
I feel like there's a rhythmic song that kind of fades in with something weird, then changes, but for the life of me, I can't remember it. All right, Jim.
Yeah, the beginning part that Mark was talking about, it's almost like, this may not be the right word, like a dissonance or something. It's very it's scary almost. Like you're watching a horror flick, and it's like, oh my God, the vampire or the monster or the whatever is coming after you, and then boom, all of a sudden things just kind of calm down for a second. We get this story going. And I want to draw a parallel to this, really just by saying that I think these two are alike, to the song Mother. I mean, that's about a bar called Mother that closed, and it talked about the children, and so there's some connection there between those two songs, 2.5 decades later. But yeah, Angels on the Balcony, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in stores when I'm grocery shopping or something, and all of a sudden Angels on the Balcony come up, and I'm like, geez, that wasn't even released as a single, and this store's playing it. And I hear it more than I hear The Tide Is High sometimes in some of these places. I don't know if anybody else has had that problem, but it makes me wonder though, because we all kind of, I think, agree that this would have made a really good single. Were there any other songs that were released promotionally as potential next singles after Rapture? I mean, the only two songs I know of that were singles were Rapture and The Tide Is High. So, I don't know.
I thought that there was a rumor that T-Birds was going to be a third single, and then Chrysalis decided to go and promote Cuckoo instead.
That sounds right. No, that sounds familiar.
All right, Barry.
So I have a little story about Angels on the Balcony. First of all, it's one of my very favorite Blondie songs of all of their songs. And, of course, I'm also a huge fan of Jimmy Destry's writing and so forth. But I could never figure out what it was about. And that kind of stayed in the back of my mind for many years, trying to figure out what this was about. And one day, what was one night, it was very late. I stay up really late. So it was 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning. And I'm in my kitchen playing music, and, Angels came on. And I may have been playing a version that I made that removed the dissonant part from the beginning. And I'm playing this song, and all of a sudden I had this revelation about what the meaning of the song was, at least in my personal interpretation. And it was so overwhelming that I'm literally running around in my kitchen, running around the island, like screaming and flailing and going, I finally figured it out. After 30 years, I finally figured out what Angels on the Balcony is about. And I actually sat there for another 2 hours after I regained my composure and wrote about it. So I'll send you guys a link in the chat to what I wrote. But what my impression of it was that was revealed in my personal interpretation was that, in my personal experience, for some strange reason, I tend to meet people that are very significant influences in my life and very important to me in the month of November. And I don't know why that is. And I realized that my interpretation of Angels on the Balcony is that Jimmy Destry perhaps had the same experience, where sometime in one of the winter months, he meets people who transform him in some way. And that's my personal interpretation of what the song's about.
Pretty cool. Thanks for sharing, Barry. All right. Any other thoughts on Angels? All right. So we're ending out. Is this the end of side one of the vinyl, I believe?
Yeah, one more.
Go through it. It's easy as ACB or AD. What did she say?
ACB.
ACB. And she's talking about Jerry Lee. I know a guy named, of course, you know, Jerry Lee, but I have a friend named Jerry Lee in San Francisco. So I think of him whenever I hear this song. I think the song's a bop. It's this is one I do go to. It's kind of a feel good one. Charlie, start it off.
Yeah, when I looked up the lyrics on my Apple Music, it said ACB, but CB was in there as like a CB radio, was how they wrote it as. And I thought, okay, that's different. But yeah, this is, I think, the other pure ska song on the album. This is more ska than even The Tide Is High. And yeah, I love it. And they definitely were just introducing that sound, I think, in so many ways to America at this time. And I mean, even just in the 80s, before we get to No Doubt, I think we like saw some of those ska songs come out, like with bands like Madness and whatnot, but they might not have gotten the credit for introducing ska into the American mainstream, but I'm really thinking Blondie did a lot for that. And the sound isn't for everybody, but I think that it's a sound that suits them well. I think ska and punk, that's a genre, ska punk, so it works well for this band, and I love to hear it. And not to mention them again, but I could totally hear like early No Doubt covering this, and I think it would have been awesome. And Gwen would give them credit, at least back then she would have. That's what I think on that.
I feel like there's like a little tinge of rockabilly in there too, in addition to the ska. All right, we have Mark and then Jimmy.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I definitely hear the like Charlie was saying, like the ska elements, or like, you know, with the horns and everything. But I also the guitar in it has a very, very kind of westerny, kind of spaghetti western sound to it. And I remember, like, I feel like there's a couple of songs on this that I almost feel like kind of sound like they could have been taken from like Blondie from Roadie. That has like kind of like that kind of, you know, when they're wearing their Western gear and they're cranking out Ring of Fire and stuff. I was like, I'm wondering if they were kind of inspired by that, because it kind of has like that kind of sound. And, you know, and it's like a song about, you know, being on the run, I guess, you know, being in love and being on the run and on the road and getting through roadblocks and stuff. I mean, it kind of has almost like, I'm also trying to think of like the stuff that was around at that time. And like, you know, Willie Nelson was very big, and there was a big country and Western resurgence in America at that point. And I feel like a lot of that kind of bled into Blondie, and this was kind of like their take on it and like their little twang on it. I also noticed that through the album, you hear a lot more of Chris's guitar playing. And I know that there was kind of some animosity with Frank at the time, and I don't hear Frank as much, and I hear a lot of Chris's guitar playing, especially in this song, and I kind of like it. I mean, I like that, like, quirky, you know, and he plays kind of like a country and Western player, and this song is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I do remember, though, I used to crank it when I was, you know, like a kid in my bedroom. And I remember my mom like opening my door, trying to tell me to turn it down. And then she started doing like a mom dance in front of me to this song. And every time I hear this song, all I see is my fucking mother just doing this really bad dance in front of me.
Oh my God, I love it. All right, we have Jimmy, then Jim.
Well, this is one where I like asked myself, okay, so now I guess I'm at the rodeo when this one starts because and I basically Mark said everything that I was thinking. So thank you, Mark. I agree with you completely. And but I think that the line "I love you, honey, give me a beer." Why somebody has not done something with that in the country music realm, I don't know because it's a freaking genius lyric right there.
This is one of those songs that when I plays, I have to go back and play it like 3 or 4 times in a row. Like I just think it's so infectious. This is definitely one of my favorites on this album. All right, Jim.
Yeah, it's a fun, almost happy type song, even though there's a few little darker things in it, but yeah, it's kind of a happy song. I love it too, and the horns in it are just absolutely great. And when that song ends with that hit of the horns and stuff, it's like you are not going to forget this song. Even at the last note, you are not going to forget the song. And and that was their intent. It was, what did Debbie say in Band Reunited, not Band Reunited. What was the other one that VH1 had? Behind the Music. She said, "Balls to the wall, Blondie," and that's kind of what Go Through It is. It's like different, but you hear Chris, you got Debbie's vocals, you got Clem's drums, you got those horns. I mean, it truly. I mean, it's a great Blondie take on a country or a ska song. It's a great song. I don't know if any of you have noticed, though, she changes the point of view narrative in the song. At first, it's kind of a third person narrative, and then she gets into the part where she goes, just like Jerry Lee, she's tuning in on me. So she takes the male persona in verse 2 of the song. And I always kind of thought that was an interesting twist, because then we go back to being the third person telling the story in the last verse of the song. So I don't know, just my weird thing about the song, but love it, love it, love it. This is one I could play over and over and over again from that album.
All right, this might be a hot take here, but I feel like we've talked about how Clem is more restrained and Debbie's vocals are a little bit less aggressive. I also feel like on this album, I know some of the songs there's a lot less background harmonies than on some of the other songs. Not as many layers. So when Debbie comes in with that harmony in the last line of the song, it's just so sweet to me hearing that harmony. And I feel that lack. There's some songs on side 2 where the lack of like background vocals almost gave a couple of songs like a demo-ish quality to me, because they just don't seem as produced as some of the stuff on the last albums before it. But I don't know, just a hot take. Barry.
Speaking of demos, I Love You, Honey, Give Me a Beer is the title of one of the demos that they put on the new box set.
Yeah, and that's a great version of that song. The demo is just as good as the album version, I think.
I love it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and they performed this song in England in 1993 in the winter tour, and also in the U.S. in the spring tour in '94, like April and May, I believe it was. And she performed that song on almost every show. I went to all of them, so nearly every day or every day. I don't remember exactly, but did that song. It was very unique.
I do feel by the last measures of the song, Debbie gives it a little bit more bite than she's given so far on the album. And that, when the harmony comes in and Debbie gives it a little bit more bite, it's perfect. Mark, is your hand up? Nope. Okay. I don't have my glasses on. So, all right. We are flipping over the vinyl. We are back at that uptown disco that we were at for Live It Up. I feel like we're back. We're not in Studio 54. We're not a sister album with Grace Jones. What was her disco album? Fame, Portfolio, and Muse, right? Those were her 3 disco albums. Blondie Disco is a little bit more uptown than those albums. Do the Dark is the beginning of side 2. Jimmy, then Mark.
Okay. I want the instrument that you start hearing that has the almost Moroccan sound drove me crazy as a teenager. Like I really wanted somebody to just remove that from the song when I was a teenager. I remember that sound being so annoying to me as a kid, though. But I agree. We're at a different disco than we were at Live It Up. I mean, this is kind of like a maybe a more sophisticated disco. I like the ethereal vocals to it. Very confident. And then the lines, the way she sings "Walk on Glass, Walk on Fire" at the end is so seductive. I mean, it just is melty. You just melt. And the keyboards as this song fades. I mean, I really love the song. I've come to appreciate the instrument, whatever it is in the beginning, and it doesn't really bother me. I have no idea why it really just annoyed me as a kid, but that was my only fault with it. But I just love those vocals. "Walk on Glass, Walk on Fire." I could just listen to that on loop.
Who wrote this one? Does anyone have it in front of them? I'll look on Wikipedia.
I thought it was Jimmy. I thought Jimmy Destry wrote this.
I thought it was too. I just didn't want to give fake news.
Jimmy Destry.
Jimmy Destry?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's another one of Jimmy Destry's great tracks. I love Do the Dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark and then Jim.
Yeah, I think this might be, for me, this might be the best song on the album. I love this song. I think it's a great opener to the second side. I feel the second side has, a little bit of sin, a little bit of the devil in it, and I think this is definitely the perfect opener. I love whatever that synthesizer that Jimmy is playing. That sound, I guess, it's supposed to sound like a sitar or something like that, but it doesn't. It has like that. That has like that, very Eastern kind of sound to it. But Nigel Harrison's bass in combination with Clem's drums on this, that boom, 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 so tight and so good. It just immediately creates that groove. And then Debbie kind of has she goes back into like her higher register, and it's very coy and it's very alluring, and it's she's back to like the old time storyteller voice that I love so much in Debbie. And that first line, "There you are giving candy, come here, little boy, I got candy," and luring them in to do this dance with the devil. I think it's just so finely crafted and so well done. It just immediately evokes a mood to this side too, and I think it leads really, really well into where we're going to go in the next song. I think that the order on this is just perfection, and this is, like I said, this is my favorite song on the album.
I always saw that instrument at the beginning. I always thought of it as like a snake charmer kind of flute.
Yeah.
And which kind of foreshadowed a little bit of the stuff that happened on Cuckoo for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Jeremy. There are some songs on Cuckoo that are very similar to the sound on this one. Now, you guys probably are not going to like this, but to me, when I first heard this song, of course, as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, it made me think of Star Wars for some reason. The scene in Star Wars where they're in the disco and they're playing the music and it really kind of took me back to that. But I love this song. I agree with Mark. I think it's an excellent opener for the second side. It's a great lead for the next song coming up. And the lyrics are so dark in this song. I don't know if anybody's really looked at the lyrics, but like Mark said, there you are giving candy. It's like, oh my God, where's your white van? And are you going to take a kid, in a few minutes, and then playing with fire and what in the world is, Do the Dark Apostle? What, I mean, come on, what is she talking about here? But it's really, to me, it's a very kind of dark song where on the front you kind of had some more lights, fun stuff. On this side, all of a sudden we're getting fun, but man, we're going to talk about some weird stuff on the second side. So that's just my take on it. I love the song, even though I think it sounded like Star Wars. And what in the world is making that one sound, not the kind of sitar thing, but there's some other thing that goes wow, through the song, and I have no idea what that instrument is, and I would love to find out, because I would love to play around with that sound on some of my songs. And it may be an effect that they used on a guitar or something like that, but oh my gosh, it's like, how do I find out what that sound is? I guess I got to contact Jimmy Destry, but I don't know.
But what's interesting is all of these songs are so different, but they're all so Autoamerican. Like they definitely fit this album, and I feel like a lot of them couldn't be on any other Blondie album. Like I don't hear "Do the Dark" fitting in anywhere on any of the previous albums. It definitely belongs here with this collection. Any other thoughts on this song before we move along? All right, well, next we have a little old song called Rapture. Just a little old ditty from Blondie. Does anyone have anything to say about this one before we move on? I'm just kidding. This song is
horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, horrible. A piece of history. I don't know if there's any Madonna fans here, but one of the bonus tracks on Confessions on a Dance Floor is Fighting Spirit. I feel like that was her tribute to Rapture. The chimes. This song, I could talk about it for like 3 hours, but that's what you guys are here for. I do have to give a shout out to my late cousin Josh. He is no longer with us, but when we were kids, he thought she was saying finger fucking and not finger popping. Yeah, so he's like, we were like kids in elementary school. Yeah. He's like, oh my God, listen to what Debbie's saying. All right, Charlie, your hands up.
Let me unmute myself there first off. Yeah, this song, it's a wild song. I mean, when I first heard it, I was a kid because this is one of the iconic Blondie hits. But I didn't like it at first. I was like, what is this? This is so weird. But now after hearing it a lot, of course, now I can see that it's a classic. I mean, its weirdness is in its beauty, and I feel like this is one of the strangest songs that ever was a #1 hit, but it is so damn catchy that it could not have never been a #1 hit. And that's just the beauty of Blondie right there. No other band could have done this successfully, I don't think, at the time. So yeah, that's my thought on Rapture. Classic tune. And I think the last song I'm discussing tonight. I think I gotta get out of here. I'm sleepy.
Oh, well, I'm glad you could join us.
So am I. Have a good night.
Bye, Charlie.
Good night.
I do feel like this song is timeless. Like if you heard the song, you wouldn't be like, oh, there's 1980. It just has a timelessness to it. Another thing, we talked about this for Heart of Glass, how there's, the best of Blondie had a different mix. I feel like there's a few different mixes of Rapture floating around.
Oh yeah.
Which I enjoy all of them. Mark and then Jimmy.
Yeah, it's funny when I listen to the album, I miss the drum intro to Rapture because it just goes into the and it goes right into it. I remember it's like, oh, I miss the drums that's on the Best of Blondie intro. Last year, the Museum of New York City had an exhibit all about the history of music in New York City and the 80s. And as you would walk into this exhibit, there was a huge video screen, and they had Rapture on a loop, and it was your intro to New York to the New York music scene of the 80s. And when I hear this song, that's what I think of. I think it's just very, very, very New York. Evokes a certain time. It completely evokes like 1980, 1981 in New York City. And it has so many like influences. It has the hip hop thing, but it also kind of has like that chic influence of like that, uptown thing. And yeah. And I remember once seeing an interview with Nigel. It was around the period of The Hunter when they were interviewing the band, and he was saying how worried he was because Debbie was working with Nile Rodgers, who he thought was like the greatest bass player in the world. And I'm sorry, his bass playing on Rapture is great. It's just and he did. He's totally doing like a chic riff and stuff. But I absolutely love it. I feel like Debbie and Chris as songwriters, you can really feel the energy of the two of them playing off of each other. And I feel like in a way their songwriting almost kind of came to a kind of completion. We've heard elements of this song before in the past, like Attack of the Giant Ants and stuff like where they have an obsession with, B-movie sci-fi. And I really feel like it came together as a whole in this album. And a lot of fun. I also feel like, I mean, Blondie got a lot of flack at the time for kind of being too R&B or too disco at the time, and history's kind of proven that not to be true, and been very kind to them. But I also hear elements of, like, say, the Tom Tom Club in this, and I hear elements of like Kid Creole and the Coconuts in this, and even like Big Audio Dynamite. I can like kind of hear like certain elements, of things to come, and how much they were very much in tune with what was very current and going to be current. I feel it's really one of their most successful songs, and it's just a complete banger. I remember when it came out, and the first time I saw it was when they introduced it on Solid Gold, when she was hosting Solid Gold. And I remember the next day when we went into school, everyone was like, "What the hell was that? That was crazy. That was bonkers." But was the Rapture, Which, P.S., they're apparently predicting the Rapture in another 3 days or something. So,
yay!
So maybe the song will have an uptick in sales. I don't know.
Good. I'm on PTO in 3 days, so at least I'll be able to enjoy it. Now, we had to mention that I never thought about it, that the word rap is in the title, Rapture. I never thought about that till right now. It's interesting how, like, I keep bringing this up, how Blondie was planting seeds of things that were to come. Another famous white rap came 3 months later when Tina Marie released Square Biz, another one of my favorite songs. However, Madonna should not have rapped on American Life. So,
agreed.
Debbie did great. Lady T, Tina did great. Madonna, step away from the microphone. All right. Jimmy, then Jim.
Okay, I'm going to echo Mark yet again. I think that we must have written the same notes, because I was like, is this Chic? Listen to this bass riff. I was like really feeling it. I love the vocals. I mean, because it sounds like she's in ecstasy in this song. And then the lyric, 24-hour shopping. This is the pinnacle. Well, we reached the point where you can shop now for 24 hours if you wanted to. It's kind of like that was a dream back then, to be able to shop for 24 hours, and that came true. And then it's like the rap itself, I mean, for a rap, the lyrics are kind of insipid, but it's kind of like you said, it's like their version of the Attack of the Giant Ants. It's just carrying forth what they had built on. But then the guitar solo in a disco rap song, I think that was probably pretty innovative, at the time, to really rip into the guitar. And, I just get a great rhythm section in this. I love the mix. My favorite mix is the one on the Best of Blondie, actually. Because then they have the other lyrics of Man to Man, like Debbie singing it, and I'm listening, and I am all about listening to that. I'm like, wait, oh, what? I'm going there. Wherever she's singing about, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the rap was a little corny and probably wouldn't have flown even like 6 years later.
Right.
But for being an innovator, and I guess there was still a little bit of innocence at the time. So I feel like on one hand, it's a little corny, but on the other hand, it worked like 200%. It worked and couldn't have been any different. I think it's perfect. Okay, Jim.
All right, so Jeremy, I have to disagree with you about 6 years later. Those rap lyrics may have not been as acceptable or whatever, likable. I mean, when you got crap coming out like Escape Club, Wild Wild West at that time, please, Rapture would have put that to sleep if it had been released the same year, I think. But Mark, to echo on what you're saying about Nigel Harrison, I really believe he is probably one of the most underestimated bass players from that era of music. I really do, because he did some great stuff. I mean, just look at Atomic, that bass solo in Atomic, and then you've got the bass in Do the Dark and in Rapture, and I mean that bass line in Rapture is iconic, almost as iconic as the beginning of One Way or Another. I mean, you hear that bass line, you're like, oh yeah, Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. I mean, that's what you think. I find it interesting that the single they released in America is not the version they played on the radio in America. And at the time, you could not buy that unless you bought the import version of it, because it was, I guess, a Mike Chapman edit of the disco mix or something like that. And, I spent years looking for that because I was 10 years old. I didn't know about import records, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I want that version from the radio. And I couldn't find it. And then I find the disco version of it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is almost it. And it just took me years to find that version, that shorter version that they played on the radio here. But I thought that was strange that they released the album version on the single, which isn't typical because it's a 6.5-minute song, and you don't do that on a 45, for radio. But they didn't play the same version. And then, oh Lord, there was one other thing I was going to say about it. Oh, just that, here we go. Here's another song where Debbie makes reference to vampires. There are a lot of Blondie songs that allude to kind of a vampire theme. And this is one of them with the, in that verse Jimmy was talking about, seismic decibel, bite the jugular. So, it's interesting how she throws in those vampiric references, I guess. So it's a great song, very memorable as Heart of Glass.
Yeah, and to echo what you said, there's multiple times listening to this album when Nigel's part stuck out to me, so I feel like he's definitely one of the stars of this album. Any other thoughts on Rapture? All right, well, a classic, we can all agree. Next, we're back in the lounge. Faces. I kind of, everything I said about the other one, I kind of feel the same about this one. Mark.
See, now everything I said about Here's Looking at You, I feel differently about Faces. And I feel like she really kind of pushed her vocal in this. And I feel like she kind of, floated in and out of it. And I really like the story that she was telling on this. It was funny as I was listening to this song in particular. I was like, there are several songs on this album that easily could have just become part of like a Deborah Harry solo effort. Where I'm thinking like, Here's Looking at You and this song and even Follow Me and something that are just so like, off the mark and not off the mark, but, just kind of like very singerly, like, like they kind of rest on the vocal. But I feel that this song is just great. And it's like, she's telling the story of, life on the Bowery. And I really think her vocals are, her lyrics are really, really amazing and well thought out in this song, the song of like a destitute bum and stuff. And I guess it came from a story that she had told in I think she told in both of her books, of a bum that had froze on the sidewalk on Christmas morning. And she kind of created this story of this poor destitute person, who lost his wife and, she was screwing around with other people. And it's a wonderful torch song. And, I really love when she kind of gets to the end where she's going back and forth with Tom Scott's saxophone, and that now he's shooting power cuts, and then she's like just going back and forth with him, and I'm like, come on, give us more of that. And then and when she gets to her arms surround other lovers, and she's belting it out, and you never really heard Debbie sing in that vein before. It was remember the first time hearing it as a kid, this was not the kind of music that I was listening to at the time. And it really, really piqued my interest in torch songs and stuff like that, and singers who sang like that. I'm very, very, very fond of this song. And I believe she wrote this on her own. I believe this is just hers, which
yes,
you don't see happen that very often. So one of my favorites on this album.
It's interesting because there's two musicians on Autoamerican from the Joni Mitchell universe. Of course, we have Tom Scott, who did a lot on Court and Spark and the albums from that era. And we have Alex Acunta, who played on Don Juan's Reckless Daughter and Night Ride Home. So, and interestingly enough, some of the lyrics on this, I feel like do kind of get a little bit in Joni Mitchell storytelling territory. So you're right. This definitely is the better song of the two, in my opinion, or the one that I'd go back and listen to more often. All right, Jimmy, then Jim.
Okay. When at the time of listening to it the first time, the way she starts off with Faces and like moving, like I thought that was horrible. Literally, when I was a teenager, I'm like, what the, is going on? Absolutely hated that way. It just didn't sit well with like, I guess I was maybe 16 at the time. And, I'm listening, I'm looking for like new wave music and, by that time. So it didn't really sit well with me. But now, of course, this is a precursor to what she did with Jazz Passengers, really. I mean, this song, you could just put it on a Jazz Passengers album and no one would know that it had been recorded, for this album. And of course, I wrote down exactly what Mark said about the way she starts belting it. And we hear her, just tearing it up. I love the lyrics. Of course, now I absolutely love the song, as I have now almost an adult. And I just think that, the lyrics are brilliant. They're despondent, and just the way, like Mark said, that she's going back and forth with that horn, just belting it. It's just brilliant.
Okay.
So I agree with both Jimmy and Mark. This is an excellent song, a very excellent song. It also, based on the lyrics, it also kind of matches that how the second side of the album is a little bit darker. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's washing car windows because his life has just exploded, and really, when we talked about E to the B, we talked about how that album was really showing the maturity of Blondie, the maturity growing of Blondie. And I think that this Autoamerican, especially when you have songs like Faces, songs like Do the Dark, songs like Europa, that we're continuing to see the band really grow as and mature as not only performers but writers. I mean, Debbie as a writer, along with this song right here, I mean, it really shows her ability to tell a really good story and to tell it with some good detail. And if you were to read this story in a Reader's Digest, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this poor guy, and she did it in a 3-minute song, so it's I think this is a very ingenious song for this album. Actually, I think it's perfectly placed, and it really shows what not only Debbie but the band can do outside of what people knew Blondie for 6 years earlier. So
I truly believe that the strategic choices they made in the production of this album, I think if they would have gone with the same production as E to the Beat, it would have been stale. So I think as we talk about the album, the more and more we talk about it, the more I realize how fresh it is coming after the ones before it. Okay, Barry.
Yes, Debbie did a fantastic job on the vocals on this, not only in 1980, but also she opened the shows in England in late 93 and in spring of 94 in the US with this song. And it was really phenomenal. And it was such a difficult song for her to open with that she would practice and warm up before she went on. And it was, to me, it was quite an accomplishment to be able to open with that song. It was really spectacular to see that live.
Wow.
Yeah, I was at that show in 94. And actually, Barry, you gave me your business card at that concert at Irving Plaza.
And here we are 29 years later, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I remember when she came out and the audience went ape shit when she opened up with Faces. And I remember hearing how, like, audiences were like kind of booing during those concerts and stuff. And I don't know. She had them in the palm of her hand at that show. And she got them right in with Faces. It was amazing. It was an amazing night.
Was this the Deprivation tour?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that one. I saw the Deaf Dumb Blonde tour, but I didn't see Deprivation tour.
Well, clearly from this discussion, I have not given this song. I think I never got past the at the beginning, and that's a disservice to a song. So, all right. Any other thoughts on Faces? Barry.
So I don't really have one more comment on Faces, but I have to drop from the call soon. I was wondering, would you like to hear a comment I have on Follow Me at the very, very end of the song right now, or another
go ahead.
time?
Sure.
Okay, so I don't know if all of you have heard it probably, but at the very end of the song, you know, it comes in with the ocean sounds. And then if you turn the volume up really far, you can hear someone say, "You're not really going to put this on the album, are you?"
Oh.
And I always was fascinated by that. Like, what is this? And there's a couple other songs that have little things that you can hear. I once wrote an article about it in the fanzine that I did back in the 80s. But in this particular one, you know, there's a whole sentence there. And I always thought, based on no other information, that it was someone probably in the recording booth or something that was referring to the ocean sounds. And when I became friendly with Chris sometime in 1993, I asked him, what is that? Who is that saying, "You're not really going to put this on the album, are you? And what is that about?" And he told me that was Clem, and he wasn't referring to the ocean sounds. He was referring to the song. And we got quite a laugh out of that.
Oh, man.
So that's my little gem.
Well, Barry, I know you have to leave us, but happy birthday. Thanks for sharing part of your birthday with us. And we will see you for the Hunter
pleasure.
next month, I hope.
Yes, I hope. Unless I'm unable to for some reason, I'll definitely be there. It was a pleasure, you guys.
Yeah,
Happy birthday, Barry.
Happy birthday, Barry.
Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts on Faces? All right. Well, we are moving on. We're back to the American theme with T-Birds. Much like I'm so tired. Much like Go Through It, this is a song that I just play it over and over and over. To me, it's so infectious. I love the harmonies.
Mm-hmm.
Blondie's not like the first band you go to for like a feel good moment, but they did it right here. What do you guys think of this song?
All right, Mark, you go ahead and say exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Mark, do it.
And then Jimmy he'll say he echoes you, and then I'll say I echo both of you. So go ahead.
And then I'm gonna say I need to go listen to it again. I didn't catch it.
It's funny. This is where my notes stopped. I didn't like it. No, I mean, T-Birds. I love the crunching sound of it. I love the chanting of it. I also love that like you can kind of hear like some of the guys' vocals on it.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny that it was about a roller derby female roller derby team. But I love the lyrics, circle high, circle low, call the shot, T-Birds. Those are all like moves that they do when they pull each other through. So it's fun. It's just it crunches along. It's a lot of fun. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of spoken word coming from Debbie in this album.
Yeah.
And, and for the life of me, for the last, whatever it is, was it 40 something years? I've been trying to figure out what the hell she's saying in that. I got 3,000 years ago, and something about Mayans, and and a lot of it's inaudible. But it's just a lot of fun. And like I said, I mean, there was a rumor that it was supposed to be the third single, and I think it would have been a great single. I thought it was a lot of fun. I can remember at the time even hearing it like on FM radio in New York, like on the rock and roll stations and stuff. It was very funny because this album in particular, there wasn't a lot of songs that the rock and roll stations were going to play. Things were still very, very divided and very, very, segregated in a way, musically. And I remember hearing T-Birds a lot on the WPLJ, that was an all rock station at the time, and Z100, and oh god, what other ones were there? But like in New York, and yeah, T-Birds was one of my favorite. I think it's like a return to like old Blondie, and it's where like the bands start getting back up to speed, and kind of reminiscing with like some of the older stuff, and I like it a lot.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Mark, there about the single. It should have been another single. It would have easily, been a great defender against some of the other songs that were popular in 1981 at that time. The spoken word part is 2,000 years ago, a great race of roller derby warriors lived in South and Central America. They had many gods, black sun worshiper. That's what she says. So there you go.
There it is.
Now you know. I'll put it in the
you.
chat if you want it. No, great song. Feel good song. It's about roller derby, but it's still a feel good song. And you want to just roll your windows down and crank it up when you're in the car. So
I love, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of layered vocals on this album, and I love almost the big wall of sound stacked vocals on
Very
this one.
60s.
Yeah, very maybe a little Spectre-ish.
Spectre-esque.
A little bit of a throwback to the early Blondie, but still firmly rooted in Autoamerican to me. So, one of my favorites. Anyone else have any thoughts on T-Bird?
I just want to go first on Walk Like Me so that I might sound somewhat original for one song.
All right. Well, let's move to Walk Like Me, and let's start off with Jimmy.
Now, I'm going to say this one, when I heard it, I was like, finally, new wave. We're finally getting some new wave music. I felt like had more of an aggressive tone, more kind of demanding, an attitude in the vocals. And I think this song would go on to inspire countless female bands, continuing on to this day.
This has Luscious Jackson written all over it.
Mm-hmm. And exactly. And then we do hear the line walking on imported air, which is going to come back around, in the reunion, album. But I just think that, that song was maybe ahead of its time. Because I've been thinking back to 1980, and, when you really listen to it, it's like, it's really kind of, a new wave song of maybe a little more 82, 83-ish. But I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to hear what Mark is going to say that I might have missed over.
But I want to jump in front of Mark because you talked about 83 new wave-ish. Can you guys not hear the Go-Go's We Got the Beat in that a little bit?
Right. Yes.
Especially the beginning of it. But yeah, Debbie's vocals are very aggressive here. This is the one I was referring to when we were on the other side, talking about songs on the other side. And it's just a really great in-your-face type song that I think is perfectly placed on this album. It's like, all right, we're getting ready to end this album and you're going to remember this, but then we're going to leave you with a little soothing, with a little relaxation after your step workout, type of thing. But Walk Like Me, awesome. I think that could have been a single too, instead of being the B-side of Rapture, but very good song.
All right, Mark, you go, and then I'll finish it off.
Okie dokie. I love it. It's a Jimmy Destry composition. It's a lot of fun. I love the stripped down sound of the band in this. I love that. It's like a surfer guitar in it. I guess that's Chris playing. Like I said, I don't hear a lot of Frank in a lot of the songs. But I love that. Debbie's vocal is just very like self-assured and kind of shouty, but I think it works for the feel of the song. I think the lyrics are really, really witty and poetic and forceful. We don't wear that uniform, paper men from pages torn. I think his lyric writing is very great. And, it's a marching song. And in a way it's like, march along with me. Come on, follow me, join the army, come along with our ideas, come along with our art, come along with everything. And I think it's funny that after that, the next song is Follow Me, and this ethereal, silly version, to close the album out. But I love this album. I can't really add any. I mean, you guys kind of hit it on the nail on the head. It's a lot of fun. It sounds completely Autoamerican. It still has that it kind of has like a surfery tone, but also kind of like a wall of sound, a heaviness to it. A lot of the songs have a heaviness, a fuzziness to them that is just very Autoamerican sounding to me. Yeah, and I can't really add more to it than that.
Well, I guess I'm gonna be the outlier for this one. Here goes all the Patreon subscribers. I'm just kidding. So this is my take on the song. I always loved the verses. I just love the production. I love everything about it. But I just always felt that the chorus was lazy. Just the walk like it's just not a very good hook to me. I don't like where the music goes, and then it goes back to the verses. So that's, maybe if she would have layered some harmonies on the chorus to make it feel a little less demo-y to me. But this is one of the songs I just felt the chorus could have been bigger if it was produced a little less raw. But that's just a personal opinion.
I will completely disagree with that, because I love the stripped down part of that section. I would not want to hear a pretty harmonic sound during that part. I want to hear Debbie demanding that you walk like her. So I love that part.
One thing when I was listening to it, I'm like, okay, like I just kind of remember, like, okay, this is the band that made Plastic Letters. Just a little. It had a little bit of the throwback to some of the more raw stuff, and I liked that about it. But I do love those verses, and I love that little precursor. Was Maria actually written around this time, or did he just pull the lines from this song and write the song later? Does anybody know?
I don't.
I don't know for sure when he wrote it. I mean, I thought he wrote it around 99.
Okay.
But he just pulled the line. It's a great line.
Yeah, it is a great line.
Yeah,
it's a really good line.
For him to
It's
do
a really
that
good
too.
line.
I mean, to tie in the old with the new. I mean, it was just perfect.
It's not like he grabbed something from like Heart of Glass or one way or another. Like, he pulled something off of the second to last track on Autoamerican, which is pretty cool. All right. So the final song is from Camelot. Is that correct? The album begins with an instrumental and ends with a song from a musical. So how do you all feel about Follow Me as the closing track on Autoamerican?
Love it. Think it's perfect. I really do, especially for a side of the album that when we're talking vinyl or cassette, that is so, kind of dark in spirit. And then all of a sudden we get this beautiful melodic, soothing piece of music that ends with beach sounds and what are those called? The chimes, going off you want to kind of like just go away, fall asleep, and just fly away with this song. This song is probably one of my top 5 favorite Blondie songs, even though it's a remake of something. Their version of this, and really to me, it only sounds like it's her and maybe Jimmy playing on this song. I'm not sure, but it's just, it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I love it too.
Yeah, for me, this was Debbie saying, I can sing anything.
Mm-hmm.
This is Debbie putting a stamp on it. Like, she has taken us so many places on this album, so many styles, and she is like saying, I can sing anything. And she nails it. It's so stylized in the best kind of way. It's not a sloppy production. It's like very intense, almost wistful kind of vocals. But I just think that, Debbie is put her stamp on it at the end of this album. I can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. And she did.
All right, Mark, what do you think of this one?
I mean, I'm not angry with it at all. It's very funny. It's like I feel like the first song was like the opening, the opening of the film, and this is your closing credits.
Mm-hmm.
They're closing
Yep.
it out.
Absolutely.
I think the vocal is lovely. I think Debbie Harry's a vocalist that can get a whole lot out of a whole little, and she can pull something up by just doing, when she does it just right, she can really get a lot out of it. She can really milk a vocal by, and I think she's pretty darn perfect in this. I don't necessarily understand, it's a beautiful song. And once again, I think it kind of falls into the category. There's like a few songs in this that could have been a Debbie Harry solo project,
Oh, yeah.
like Faces, Here's Looking at You, in this song, where, she's not really relying so much on the band as opposed to, just a sound. And I think it's interesting. I think at this point, like, Debbie was really seriously thinking about becoming an actress. And I really think she was trying to sell herself as an actress at this time, and to say that she was very versatile and she was trying to paint herself as something more than, the Blondie persona. And I think she did a great job. I think she did a really great job. Yeah. It's not the song that I will immediately make a beeline to, but it's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful piece of music.
I think that I think it would be very, very interesting if Blondie or even Debbie solo picked songs like Follow Me and just did a whole album of just that kind of music, like Prelude to a Kiss. I mean, that song is just awesome. It's a beautiful song, and she did it justice. Absolutely. But I think that would make a great album if Blondie or if Debbie Harry solo did, pick songs like Follow Me from Camelot, or show tunes even, but show tunes that had a lot of emotion and feeling, not the happy go kick your leg show tune songs, but the serious ones. And I think that would be an awesome album. And for her, that her 80th birthday, she needs to do a solo album of songs like this. I think that would be just the ultimate, to release an album like that when she turns 80 years old in 2 years. It's like, here's this woman in her 80s, still looking like she's 60. And oh my God, look, she's done something totally different again, and that's her thing. I mean, it's amazed me how popular they've become in the last 22, 23, 24 years since the reunion of them. And it seems like their staying power is better now than it was when they had tens of thousands of people in, larger arenas that they were playing for back in the late 70s, early 80s. I kind of like this version of Blondie better, but I love that song. And it would be interesting to even, how they did like Out in the Streets. They redid Out in the Streets for the No Exit album. That was a demo they did back in 74. I'd love to hear them redo Follow Me on an album and see what it would sound like, 30 years, 40 years later.
Yeah, I'll put together a compilation of Debbie Does Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, I mean, she's a great jazz singer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she really could nail it.
Yeah, I had seen her many times performing with the Jazz Passengers.
Yeah,
many clubs in New York. But did any of you get the chance to see her when she did the Carlisle residency at New York? It was great. It was really, really good. And she pulled out just these random songs and told stories in between them about what they meant to her and stuff. And, and it was her and Matt Katz-Bolton playing piano and keyboards. That was it. And she was wonderful. And she did torch songs and, French kissing on the piano and love with
love with the love. Yeah.
She did New York by Moby. But it was just done with some. But then she ended. She did Rainbow Connection, and thing on it. And she just did these very random, wonderful songs, and it was amazing. And she really could. She could, and close out the end of her life with just doing these amazing torch songs. She has that in her.
I just saw her Friday night, which was incredible. it was just like absolutely incredible show. It was very difficult because I was right front row on the rail, right in the front. And so I tried to be somewhat respectful and not like put the camera up to her face when she was like right in front of me. But for me, I was wanting to capture every moment because you never know when you're going to be able to see somebody again. So, but it was just, you could tell she still enjoys performing. And, I'm like you, it would be incredible to hear her just do something a little bit more subdued, a little sophisticated, and just put it out there, on her own at 80 years old. Why not? She can do it. She'll look great.
For my Debbie wish list, I think of like when Marianne Faithfull was doing stuff like in the 90s, like A Secret Life with the Twin Peaks gentleman, or the 21st Century Blues, I think was the album, when she was doing like really dark atmospheric stuff. And I think Debbie could really pull off something awesome. You guys are probably gonna make fun of me, but I was thinking of her solo stuff. Like, I loved the Rockbird album. I probably listened to Rockbird more than Autoamerican, to be honest with you.
That's a good one.
I loved it beginning to end, every damn song. So we may have to go back and do the Debbie solo album someday.
Yes, we need to.
I'm there for it.
I'm there.
Yes.
I'm there.
So I feel like, if Blondie would have just done Parallel Lines, they would have been a legendary 70s band. If they would have followed it up with Eat to the Beat, they probably would have been a legendary 70s band. But I feel like Autoamerican really cemented their legacy beyond just the hit of Heart of Glass. They had 2 more #1 singles on this album. It was a really daring album. I think even I have more to learn from this album, and I've listened to it on and off for years, but it's never one that I've played out as much as the other ones. And I think there's more for me to discover here, especially based on some of the comments that y'all made.
I think they were the first band, and correct me if I'm wrong, because Mark and Jimmy, you probably know better, but I think, weren't they the first band to actually have 4 #1 hits within a 2-year period? I mean, I don't even think the Beatles had done that.
I mean, I remember there being a big deal made about the kind of tight #1 hits. I do remember that, but I don't remember specifically.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, because Heart of Glass was like the 3rd single off of Parallel Lines.
Oh, yeah.
And they were getting ready to release, Eat to the Beat, and then Call Me comes out a couple months after Eat to the Beat. So it was just very, 79, 80, 81. And then you Rapture hit, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is the first band that's done this in like 18 months or something like that. But they've had 4 #1 hits. And the Titus Highs really struggled. It was only at #1, I think, 1 week. And it would bounce back and forth between, in that top 5, and then finally hit that #1. And it was like, thank goodness it made it.
It was battling John Lennon.
Yes.
John Lennon, which ironically, Sean Lennon had said that one of his earliest memories was of his father playing this album over and over again.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
When you guys hear this album, even though it's recorded in LA, it still feels like a New York album to me, for sure. All right, so on the famous Phonogenics 1 through 10 scale, where do you all rate Autoamerican? I gotta think.
Jeremy, you go first.
Well, I think the album had really big balls. Like, I think they could have really played it safe, and they really, really didn't play it safe. And I think there are a lot of experiments here, and I don't think any of the experiments were necessarily a failure. Some of them aren't my kind of music, but I think they were all successful experiments. There's 2 iconic #1 singles. There's a little bit of everything. Oh, shit. I want to say an 8 or 9, but I want to see what you guys say before I cement that in. How about you guys?
I'll start. This album is my go-to when I'm like, I'm going to listen to Blondie. I always look for that yellow strip on my vinyl, and I pull it up because it was my first one. So, and you never forget your first, So for me personally, it's a 10, because it's just my go-to. But I'm going to say, to be fair, there are some side steps to it, and I would probably, like, being realistic, give it like an 8.5 maybe.
All right, let's do Jim next, because we're going to end with Jimmy's resequencing. I think that's gonna be the traditional end to these podcasts. Jim,
Yeah, I've been waiting with bated breath.
I know.
2 hours to hear this sequencing. So, like Mark, this is a go-to album, but it's not my first go-to album for Blondie. It's my number 2 go-to album. So I'm going to give this one a 9.5 because I just, it's okay. My dad gave me this album, so that's part of it. There's a great memory there. But the 2 number ones, the diversity on the album, the way it opens, the way it closes. Yeah, there are a couple little side steps, like you guys said, but it really doesn't affect the overall package. The overall package is very pleasing. You are not left wanting for more. Right. You are, but not in a bad way. You're not left wondering, wow, what was this about? You know what it's about. Mm-hmm. And it's just I think it's well lined up, sequenced. Sorry, Jimmy. The artwork is beautiful. This is just, I don't know. For me, this is number 2, the Blondie album. So 9.5.
All right, before Jimmy goes, I'm gonna lock mine in at a 9. Because I think the 4 albums we did already, I know them front to back. And I've listened to this album, and I think that I have more time with this album. And what is it, 40 years later, 40 something? Mm-hmm. For an album to still have more to give and to have, things to still discover, that says a lot about it. Mm-hmm. Jimmy.
Okay. Well, if I had to pick a favorite Blondie album, I don't know that this would be my necessarily favorite Blondie album, but I would give it a 10.
Oh, great.
I will give this album a 10, and I will stand behind it because I think that it is I think they so successfully completed what they set out to do. I cannot imagine it being any better with the intent behind it. I think that they took me places I hadn't been, gave me sounds that I necessarily wasn't familiar with. I think that this album is like literally a masterpiece of its, just a masterpiece. I really do. I think it's almost like a work of art in and of itself.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Well, do we have
and the sequencing? I would not change a thing.
No.
Yes.
Oh.
I knew it.
Oh my God.
I knew it.
I think it's perfectly paced.
It's a Phonogenics first and last.
Probably, yes. It will be the last, probably.
Wow. Well, gentlemen, I have to say I am really, really, really enjoying these discussions. Because I feel like every time I get to know you all a little bit better, I'm so excited to keep going with these. Next month we're gonna be tackling The Hunter. I don't even know what everyone's gonna think here. But we'll find out next month. So thanks to my Patreon subscribers, some that are here. Thanks to Blondie for coming out with some of the best inventive music ever made. And does anyone have any final thoughts about the Autoamerican era before we sign off and get ready for The Hunter in October?
I don't, Jimmy, you have won a warm place in my heart for not changing the sequence of this album.
Yeah,
just awesome. So thank you.
Jimmy, I give you a 10.
Yes.
All right, friends. I'll see you next month. Thank you.
Goodbye.